Welcome, fellow witches, wizards, and magical enthusiasts, to a tale that's been left tucked away in the folds of history, a question that's lingered in the minds of Harry Potter fans for years. Where exactly was Newt Scamander during the events of Harry Potter? The famed magizoologist, the man who quite literally wrote the book on magical creatures, seems conspicuously absent in the era when Voldemort terrorized Britain. But, as with all things magical, the story is rarely as simple as it seems. To unravel this mystery, we must first understand Newt Scamander as a character. Newt was never one for the spotlight. From his earliest adventures chronicled in the Fantastic Beasts series, we see that he's a man with his own priorities. He's an empathetic soul, drawn more to the wild wonders of the magical world than to the chaos of human conflict. His love for magical creatures, coupled with his natural tendency to work behind the scenes, paints a picture of someone who, while immensely powerful in his own right, would likely avoid the front lines of wizarding warfare unless absolutely necessary. Yet, this does not mean Newt was absent from the story entirely. To understand his whereabouts during Voldemort's rise to power, we must consider two key aspects of his life: his dedication to magical creatures and his deep connections to Dumbledore. Let's begin with the first, his lifelong mission to protect and study magical creatures. Even in his older years, Newt remained devoted to safeguarding creatures from harm, particularly in a world that often misunderstood them. It's plausible that during Voldemort's reign, Newt was working tirelessly to shield magical creatures from the effects of the war. The chaos of the Second Wizarding War would have had far-reaching consequences, impacting not only witches and wizards but also the ecosystems in which magical creatures lived. For instance, dragons, hippogriffs, and even nifflers might have been caught in the crossfire as Death Eaters spread destruction across the wizarding world. Imagine Newt, older but no less spry, trekking across remote, dangerous terrains, moving magical creatures to safety. He might have been reinforcing protections around sanctuaries, such as the dragon reserves in Romania, or even creating entirely new safe havens. These efforts would have been essential in preserving the delicate balance of the magical world, even if they remained largely unnoticed by those fighting on the front lines. And then there's Newt's relationship with Albus Dumbledore. We know from the Fantastic Beasts series that the bond between these two wizards ran deep. Dumbledore trusted Newt implicitly, relying on his resourcefulness, bravery, and knack for handling sensitive situations. While there's no direct mention in the Harry Potter series of Newt aiding Dumbledore during the events of Voldemort's return, it's not hard to imagine that Newt was quietly assisting him in ways that would have remained hidden from the public eye. Was Newt gathering intelligence from far-off corners of the world? Was he entrusted with missions so secretive that they've yet to come to light? After all, Newt was no stranger to the dark forces of the magical world, having faced Grindelwald decades earlier. But what if Newt's absence wasn't solely due to his love of magical creatures or his covert assistance to Dumbledore? What if there's more to his story, more that connects him to the broader narrative of the wizarding world? To truly explore where Newt Scamander was during Voldemort's rise, we need to dig into the layers of his personality and the timeline of his life. Newt Scamander was no ordinary wizard. He was someone who saw the magical world not as divided into light and dark, but as an interconnected web of life where every creature played a role. And this worldview, his respect for all living things, would have informed every action he took during the tumultuous years of Voldemort's second rise to power. Let's dive deeper into his connection to Dumbledore, which may hold the key to his activities during this period. We know that Dumbledore rarely trusted anyone, preferring to orchestrate plans alone, yet Newt was an exception. Their bond, forged in the fires of Grindelwald's threat decades earlier, suggests that Dumbledore may have relied on Newt in ways we've only begun to imagine. Consider the state of the wizarding world as Voldemort regained power. Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix was stretched thin, combating Death Eaters across Britain. Resources were limited, and while Harry and his friends worked tirelessly to destroy Horcruxes, Dumbledore may have needed a different kind of ally, someone capable of moving unnoticed, slipping through the cracks of Voldemort's expanding reach. And who better than Newt Scamander? It's entirely plausible that Newt, far from staying idle, was sent on covert missions by Dumbledore. Missions so sensitive that even members of the Order wouldn't have known about them. After all, who would suspect a slightly eccentric magizoologist traveling with his battered suitcase of carrying out vital tasks against the Dark Lord. Imagine this, Newt, still armed with his magical case filled with creatures, traveling to places that others dared not go. He might have been retrieving rare ingredients for potions crucial to the Order, or seeking out magical creatures with unique properties that could tip the scales in the war. Perhaps he was investigating long-forgotten magical sites, searching for hidden truths that might aid in Voldemort's downfall. Now, consider another possibility. Newt's knowledge of magical creatures and ecosystems may have made him a key figure in resisting Voldemort's forces in ways that weren't immediately apparent. For instance, could Newt have been protecting creatures like phoenixes, whose tears had powerful healing properties? Could he have worked to ensure the safety of thestrals, which were often misunderstood, but capable of incredible loyalty to those who earned their trust? There is even a tantalizing theory that Newt may have had an indirect hand in Harry's eventual triumph. Remember Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix? While there's no direct evidence linking Newt to Fawkes, it's fascinating to speculate whether Newt's work with magical creatures might have had some connection to the phoenix that played such a pivotal role in Harry's journey. It's also worth noting that Newt would have understood the stakes of Voldemort's reign on a personal level. His wife, Tina Goldstein, and his brother, Theseus Scamander, would have been deeply affected by the growing darkness in the wizarding world. Tina, with her aura instincts, might have pushed Newt to stay involved, while Theseus, once a decorated war hero, may have been drawn into the fight once more. The harrowed prince had been drawn into the fight once more. Could Newt have been protecting his loved ones from the shadows, all while contributing to the larger fight in his own quiet way? This paints a picture of Newt not as absent, but as operating in the periphery of the war, a shadowy figure whose contributions were critical but unsung. But is it possible that Newt's connection to the events of Harry Potter runs even deeper than this? Could his efforts have left a legacy that shaped the wizarding world in ways we've yet to fully realize? As we delve deeper into the question of Newt Scamander's whereabouts during Voldemort's rise, it's impossible to ignore one of the most intriguing threads in his story: his legacy. Newt's work wasn't just about preserving magical creatures. It was about creating a future where the magical and natural worlds could coexist in harmony. And though his direct actions may have remained hidden from view, the ripple effects of his life's work undoubtedly influenced the events of Harry Potter. One of the most striking examples of Newt's indirect influence is his magnum opus, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. This iconic textbook wasn't just a whimsical guide to magical creatures, it was a cornerstone of magical education for generations. Harry himself used this book during his years at Hogwarts, flipping through its pages for insights into creatures like hippogriffs and bowtruckles. But what if Fantastic Beasts was more than just a textbook? What if its impact extended far beyond the classroom? Consider this. During Voldemort's second rise to power, knowledge was one of the most critical weapons available to the wizarding world. Knowing how to defend against dangerous creatures, or how to work with them, could mean the difference between survival and defeat. It's entirely possible that wizards and witches fighting in the war relied on Newt's research to navigate the dangers they faced. Aurors in particular might have drawn upon his insights when encountering magically enhanced creatures that Voldemort's forces could have unleashed. But what about Newt's direct contributions during this time? For this, we must examine the broader wizarding world outside Britain. Voldemort's terror was concentrated in the United Kingdom, but magical communities around the globe would not have been immune to its effects. We know from Fantastic Beasts that Newt was deeply connected to the international wizarding community, having travelled extensively in his youth. It's conceivable that during Voldemort's reign, Newt was leveraging these global connections to rally support, share intelligence, or provide safe havens for those fleeing the chaos in Britain. For example, what if Newt worked alongside wizarding governments like Macusa in the United States, or the French Ministry of Magic? While the British Ministry of Magic was infiltrated and paralysed by Death Eaters, other nations might have been more active in resisting Voldemort's influence. Newt, with his reputation as a trusted and capable wizard, could have acted as a liaison between these governments and Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix. Perhaps Newt even had a hand in convincing other nations to prepare for a world in which Voldemort might have extended his dominion beyond Britain. And yet, Newt's efforts likely didn't stop at political or strategic contributions. His intimate understanding of magical ecosystems may have allowed him to protect critical magical sites from falling under Death Eater control. Imagine Newt racing to secure ancient dragon nesting grounds in the Romanian mountains, or shielding a hidden sanctuary for endangered magical creatures in South America. These actions, though invisible to the likes of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, may have preserved magical resources that would have otherwise been exploited by Voldemort's forces. But there's another, more personal possibility to consider. Newt's legacy may have lived on through the very people he influenced. Luna Lovegood, one of the most beloved characters in Harry Potter, was an avid admirer of magical creatures. Her open-mindedness and curiosity often drew comparisons to Newt himself. Could Luna's respect for magical creatures have been indirectly inspired by Newt's work? It's possible that her father, Xenophilius Lovegood, who published the Quibbler, had featured Newt's work at some point, further spreading his ideas. In this way, Newt's legacy isn't just about what he did during Voldemort's rise. It's about the seeds he planted long before. Seeds of knowledge, compassion, and curiosity that took root in people like Luna and others who resisted Voldemort, not with brute force, but with creativity and empathy. But what if Newt's story isn't merely about his actions during the war, but the unanswered questions surrounding his life after it? Could there be deeper, untold secrets that connect Newt Scamander to the fight against Voldemort in ways we've never considered? As we approach the end of our journey to uncover Newt Scamander's role during the events of Harry Potter, it's time to ask the big question. Could there be untold secrets surrounding Newt's involvement in the fight against Voldemort? Is it possible that his contributions were deliberately hidden, shielded by the very people who knew the value of his work? Let's pause to consider Newt's own nature. He was not someone who sought recognition or glory. In fact, his reluctance to engage with wizarding politics was a defining aspect of his personality. Yet despite this, Newt was deeply loyal to the people he cared about, especially Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore, who always seemed to see farther than anyone else, may have deliberately kept Newt's role hidden. What if Newt was working on something so vital, so critical to the fight against Voldemort that even the Order of the Phoenix didn't know about it? We know that Dumbledore often played a long game, setting plans into motion years before they bore fruit. Perhaps Newt was entrusted with safeguarding something essential, an ancient artifact, a rare creature, or even knowledge that couldn't fall into the hands of Voldemort. Consider this. Voldemort's obsession with immortality defined much of his rise to power. While he relied on Horcruxes to tether himself to life, there are whispers throughout wizarding lore of other magical means to cheat death. Could Newt have been tasked with protecting creatures or magical substances that could potentially aid Voldemort in achieving his ultimate goal? For instance, the Phoenix, a symbol of renewal and immortality, comes to mind. Fawkes, Dumbledore's Phoenix, was already an iconic part of the story. But what if Fawkes wasn't the only one of his kind? What if Newt was protecting other Phoenixes from falling into the hands of the Dark Lord? It's also worth considering the theory that Newt may have been involved in preserving ancient magical knowledge. Throughout his travels, Newt would have encountered magical cultures far older than Britain's, cultures that might have guarded secrets Voldemort would have killed to possess. Could Newt have been working to conceal this knowledge, burying it where no one, not even Voldemort, could find it? And then there's the possibility that Newt's work laid the groundwork for the eventual defeat of Voldemort, even if his contributions went unacknowledged. For example, what if Newt's understanding of magical creatures contributed to Dumbledore's knowledge of the Elder Wand? While Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows revealed much about the wand's history, there are still gaps in our understanding. Newt, with his expertise in wand lore adjacent subjects like magical cores, might have played a role in uncovering truths about the Deathly Hallows that Dumbledore kept secret. But perhaps the most poignant aspect of Newt's story lies in his quiet defiance of Voldemort's ideology. Voldemort sought to divide, to conquer, to impose his will on the magical world through fear and hatred. Newt, in contrast, embodied a philosophy of coexistence. He saw beauty in creatures others dismissed as dangerous or unworthy, and he dedicated his life to protecting those who could not protect themselves. And in this way, Newt's very existence was an act of rebellion against Voldemort's worldview. So, where was Newt Scamander during the events of Harry Potter? The answer may never be fully revealed, but perhaps that's the point. Newt was never one to seek recognition. Whether he was saving magical creatures, aiding Dumbledore in secret missions, or simply continuing his quiet work to preserve the wonders of the magical world, Newt's contributions were likely as unassuming as the man himself. And maybe that's why we love him. In a world of epic battles and grand gestures, Newt reminds us that heroism comes in many forms. It's not always about wielding wands in duels or fighting on the front lines. Sometimes it's about caring for the overlooked, protecting what's precious, and staying true to your beliefs, even when no one is watching. Newt Scamander may not have stood alongside Harry, Ron, and Hermione in the fight against Voldemort, but his legacy is woven into the very fabric of the wizarding world. His story, much like his beloved creatures, reminds us of the magic that exists just beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered.